Come on, you can do it. You can do it. Like,
Love it.
you haven't even moved yet.
I feel like
Yeah.
we're duplicating efforts here.
I'm with Andrew King, and we went out on a crazy night last night because we went to a Boulder first dinner to introduce people who haven't been to Boulder as a way to like connect with the community here.
Tell her the craziest thing that you did.
The craziest thing is I met this dude.
No, that wasn't the craziest, but we'll keep it going. We'll get to that a little later.
So like, can you introduce everyone what you do and who you are?
So Andrew King, startup venture capital lawyer, focused on innovation. Just finished working with Techstars, and So one of the things I think we're going to discuss today is the innovation area.
Yeah, definitely like how corporations can learn how to be innovative with Techstars.
Which is a misnomer, huh? Corporations that are innovative.
Yeah,
There's
because
not a lot of them.
Because I don't think a lot of corporations are that innovative because they become stagnant after a while.
Well put. So, there's some, we're in Boulder obviously right now, there's a lot here that are very innovative, but a lot of the companies that aren't necessarily in the NASDAQ are a lot less innovative and are searching for innovation, and they're either using corporate venture capital opportunities to invest in startups to try to bring some of that in-house, or they're creating and kind of having off their own innovation area within the corporation.
I'll probably use Samsung as an example because I'm connected with Samsung Next, and they actually have a bigger arm that everyone knows them as a electronic company.
Yep.
But they also, the way to keep themselves innovative is to have a small venture funds, and it's called Samsung Next.
So at Samsung, I'm pretty familiar with. They are the epitome of one of the companies that's trying to do this, and their portfolio is so large. I mean, Samsung, I don't know if you know this, but Samsung pretty much has an electronics portfolio that covers everything. So realistically, trying to bring that all together is actually one of their biggest challenges. It's not really innovation, but it's also portfolio management.
All right, so that's money pretty much.
Money
Talk. Money. What did you learn about, what can corporations in like 5 tips that you learned that corporations can learn from Techstars?
Yeah. So, one of the things that you learn with Techstars are, for the most part, seed stage companies, earlier stage companies. And there's just a lot less bureaucracy. And that means that the teams that are good, it comes through. And the teams that have a lot more work to do, it becomes apparent as well. And the teams, as they grow, it helps the company. And as teams that are more mature or serial entrepreneurs, there's a lot that they can do to kind of reform the organization. That being said, corporations have the opposite problem. The bureaucracy makes it really resistant to change. So there's a few different things that I found that I think corporations can kind of pull into the organization from Techstars, one of which is basically segmenting and providing a budget to a startup innovation area so that budget is dedicated and doesn't vary on the whims of
That's why it's a separate arm in the first place. So it's like, hey, you're dedicated to fund startups.
It's not easy to do though, because a lot of that stuff comes from the CFO, and CFOs since Dodd-Frank have changed a lot over the last couple of years. Traditionally, CFOs were more M&A guys or girls, and they would play a role in more corporate acquisition. Now it's become much more of an accounting function because they have personal liability for the things that they do as CFO, and so they're much more risk averse. And so the startup ecosystem is very different from what they typically play in.
It sounds like as a consultant, what is your role specifically, or some of your stories that you help corporations be innovative?
Yeah, so realistically, a lot of the work that I've done is more on the Techstars side, so the startup ecosystem side. But I've worked in, 3 investment banks, 2 sports teams, and
Esports
2 law firms.
Or actual physical sports?
Actual physical sports.
Like which? Can you name any?
So the Dallas Stars hockey team and the Pittsburgh Penguins hockey team. So I'm a big hockey guy.
Yeah.
But I also worked and covered sports as a banker at JP Morgan. And what I've seen in a lot of those firms, that was pre-digital. And so a lot of those firms are realizing, a lot like Capital One, that they have transitioned to being not just a typical bank, but actually have a technology and a product management component that's much more significant. So they're reforming the organization. They're disrupting themselves, so to speak. Most organizations that are large and more traditional, especially manufacturing organizations, have a very difficult time with that. But with IoT coming in, you're seeing GE do similar type of stuff.
So I've noticed a lot of companies that want to for example, Canon is doing really great stuff in medical science, and that's where most of the bulk of the money is. Even though brand-wise they're known for cameras.
Yeah, and well, you look at Kodak. I mean, Canon is looking at Kodak or seeing what Kodak. I mean, their flaws were they decided not to disrupt themselves, and the industry disrupted them instead, and they were left behind.
Yeah, and Kodak died eventually.
That's it, bankruptcy. Yeah, right. So.
So how can let's reiterate again. How can corporations avoid being a dinosaur?
Yeah, and to be honest, there's no one answer. It's a confluence of a bunch of different factors. It's having a management team that actually invests in innovation and believes in it, and the budget is a huge factor, because if the budget is tied to the CFO, who's very risk averse, that budget in a downturn is going to be the first thing cut, because they're going to say, well, listen, this stuff's going to fail anyway, or it's more likely to fail than not, and why are we going to allocate a budget to it? Let's protect our fiefdoms. If you have a budget that is outlined and discrete and already set aside by the CEO or the management team, that isn't impacted by the upward downward cycle of what's going on, then you can retain that innovation sphere, and people feel protected, and they're not going to get pulled back from their organization as corporate priorities change.
So is that where you want to be, like help corporations be more innovative and apply some of the techniques that you learned from Techstars?
Ideally, that's what I really enjoy doing. I think it has to come down from a management level perspective, though, because if the management doesn't buy in, the consultant, we don't execute. We just offer advice, and like all consultants, even the execution consultants, they don't decide what actually gets imbued into the corporation.
But you emphasize quite a lot about like management and having a flexibility to adapt to become, put money into startups, because it will be a lot of failures in this, and they should be aware that there's going to be a lot of failures along the way.
Yeah, and that's the risk appetite has to change. It can't be just the CFO. It's got to be an executive CEO level decision. A couple of the other things, though, that corporations don't do incredibly well is incentivizing groups differently than what the rest of the organization is. So the innovation group should be tied to milestones the same way as a startup, so that if you fail quickly, but don't penalize everybody with it, and have certain milestones set up so that you don't just take in a bunch of money and fail repeatedly without any penalty, but on the other hand, allowing people to fail over time and giving them a certain amount of runway, the same way that you would do if you were outside of that corporation and you were raising capital.
In many ways, they're almost acting like a special entity outside of thing, but they have to align with the mission.
Well put. And so I think this is one of the things that corporations struggle with, is corporate venture capital funds are kind of a halfway point between actual innovating, and then also trying to buy innovation. And oftentimes those fail because the priorities, and I've worked with those as a lawyer, the priorities are often set up that the people that are running those corporate venture capital funds on the upside make a lot of money personally, but on the downside are never penalized for it. So they're incentivized to take huge risks and repeatedly take a lot of risks. And so if things fail, they don't get fired. You don't get shut down like a startup would. But then, if things go really, really well, they capture a lot of that personal upside, and in the organization, their profile is raised.
I think that's like a really good way of finishing it off. If you're more curious and you want to hear more about how to innovate within a corporation and be more agile, connect with Andrew. He will drop his email or LinkedIn into the comments as well. All right, see you everyone.
Thanks so much.